Over the next few weeks, we are diving into a sermon series called The Rest on Purpose. It's all about Sabbath. So our Wednesday videos over the next few weeks will also be about stories about Sabbath or on Sabbath. So hear these words from Luke chapter 4. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me, to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. They said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" He said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.'" And he said, "Truly I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian." When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage. They got up, drove him out of town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. He went down to Capernaum, a city in Galilee, and was teaching them on Sabbath. They were astounded at his teaching, because he spoke with authority. In the synagogue there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, "Let us alone! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." When the demon had thrown him down before them, he came out of him without having done him any harm. They were all amazed and kept saying to one another, "What kind of utterance is this? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and out they come." And a report about him began to reach every place in the region. I recently watched an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that connected with this text in Luke 4 for me. You don't have to know much about Star Trek to have heard the phrase "take us to warp speed" before. In the fictional world of Star Trek, they found a faster than fast way to travel through the universe, so they do just that, charging the galaxies, meeting with different species, encountering different thoughts and ways of life. In this particular episode, the crew of Star Trek Enterprise meets a sibling scientist pair who have been disrupting travel to get the attention of anyone high up enough who can possibly listen to them and help. Through their research, they've discovered that the way they've depended on traveling, this warp speed, is actually damaging the fabric of space. It will lead to planets becoming uninhabitable. There will be refugees and avoidable deaths if warp speed continues to be used. Geordi LaForge, the chief engineer on Star Trek, has a hard time believing the scientific pair. After all, he's been doing this for years. He's an expert. He is the engineer in the top ship of all of Starfleet. And it feels like an attack on what he's devoted his entire life towards. This cannot be true. Don't you people know how it would change space travel forever if we could no longer use warp speed, he asks. Geordi's reaction makes me think of those gathered in the synagogue on the day Jesus comes and reads from the scroll of Isaiah. The crowd turns on Jesus, rejecting this prophet from his hometown as the people of Israel have done again and again. I wonder if their thoughts were similar to Geordi's, filled with doubt towards the truth in Jesus' words. Why should we listen to you? Are you sure? Don't you know that this changes everything? And in some ways, I wonder if it felt like an attack. Have we been doing this wrong the whole time? We too can have a similar response when we're met with new information that contradicts what we've known and done, new information that places us in the wrong and requires us to change. Shame creeps in. Social worker and researcher Brené Brown writes that shame corrodes the very part capable of change. When shame creeps in, no longer are we listening. No longer do we think of ourselves as flexible or resilient. Shame takes over, and instead we clench our fists and we double down. Like Jordy on the Enterprise, who says, no, more research needs to be done before we can listen to you. Like those in the synagogue who turn on Jesus and chase him out of town to the cliffs they hope to hurl him from. Like us as a nation, as we grapple with the complexities of our nation's founding, and we continue to realize how that affects the ways we live today and exist in relationship with one another. Jordy soon learns that the siblings are correct. The sister of the pair takes matters into her own hands and takes her own life to show Star Trek Enterprise her research in action, destroying the fabric of space where they currently are. We see Jordy's response of guilt. If only he had gone through the research again. If only he had listened. We get to see how the overseeing body in the Star Trek universe responds. They limit the use of warp speed in order to protect everyone. In the Gospel of Luke, we see Jesus is run out of Nazareth, but he finds a way out, and he heads back to Capernaum. And here he gets rid of an unclean spirit in a man. And here the people are amazed, and they see the power and authority that Jesus speaks with. And they recognize the way in which the truth, the way of life Jesus calls them towards, is the life-giving good news that is found in the scrolls of Isaiah. And reports of Jesus begin to reach people in all places. There's more resolution in an hour-long episode of Star Trek and in the Gospel of Luke than there is in the present day. But I wonder if we might be encouraged to listen again. Listen again so that we're not the people of Nazareth shaking our fists and running after Jesus to the cliffs. Listen again so we're not Geordie LaForge, met with the truth with guilt and sorrow. The unthinkable has already happened. I wonder if we might listen again, leaning into the discomfort, so we might actually hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Listen again to the good news that upsets the equilibriums, that makes us uncomfortable, that draws us forth from ourselves so that we can be with one another. The good news that's for the poor, that releases the captives, that brings sight to the blind and sets the oppressed free. Just as the scroll of Isaiah says.